Oh boy, stories with newest updates, let's go! Starting 3 months ago and off my chest, my brother proposed to my fiance, his ex, and I'm mad. Buckle up, buckaroos, because this story freaking escalates. It's got everything. Golden child a-hole brother, family members not respecting the OP and his partner, and a mother clearly from the 9 hells. So, I'm 28 male, my brother, Mark, 26 male, used to date my fiance, Jen, who's 26 female, a year ago. For context, they dated back in August of 2022. They were only together for a month before he broke things off with her because he was bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating, I was in a different state, so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend. And I had no idea who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back in October. Hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I ever met, and we met up a few times more before we made it official. Fast forward to December, and I finally bring her up to my family and propose them meeting her at Christmas. They knew I was in a relationship, but I'm not the most open about my personal life, so I kept details about her to a minimum until I knew how serious we really were. My parents asked to see pictures, and they started passing my phone around at the dinner table. Mark saw it and blew up, calling me a terrible brother for dating his ex-girlfriend, and demanded I break it off with her. I refused. Now, when I asked Jen about it, she confirmed they dated and gave me the details about their breakup. Now, it took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex, and I thought he was over it. But on Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends, and I asked her to marry me. Mark lipped once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which I and my sisters immediately shut down. So the incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about the whole thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he went low contact with me, which I had no problem with. But then he invited me and Jen for family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird, but my parents and sisters were also going, so we agreed to go. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room table to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation, Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable and demanded that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark, but I got to him first and punched him. Nice work, man. I won't repeat most of it, mostly because I was too angry to even listen to most of it, but he said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and just wanted to get back at him. Before it could get worse, my parents rushed me out and promised to talk to him. Well, it's been a few days since it happened, and I'm still mad. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts on marrying me because of this. Any advice? Comments suspect that your brother doesn't even want Jen. He just sees her as a toy that he didn't want, but seeing someone else play with it, he's like, no, mine! Like, what a frickin' child. Now, for any thoughts you might be having, the OP comes back with an edit to clarify some things that have been shared around in the comments. Jen and the OP are newly engaged. As fast as it might have seemed, they both knew they were in it for the long run. Regarding any suspicion of Jen happening to come across her ex's brother of all people, the OP was the one who approached her, not the other way around. Whether she knew or had suspicions of us being related, I don't know. I asked after finding out they dated, and she says she has no idea. I didn't have any reason to doubt that, but I can admit this seemingly overreaction on Mark's part does raise some red flags. Now, Mark and the OP aren't close at all. They used to be, but as they got older, that kind of waned. When she and Mark met again after so long, there was no sense of any residual feelings on either part. She didn't treat him like a stranger, but she wasn't overly affectionate with him either. I was told this was a relationship that lasted a month. I didn't think I needed permission from Mark to ask her to marry me, but maybe that was wrong of me. I'm not sure. Then ending us with a cliffhanger about them planning to talk to Mark this weekend to lay everything on the table. Because as he admits, he never actually asked for Mark's side of their relationship. He's purely going off what Jen told him, that Mark was scummy and wanted to just be single, etc. So how much of that is actually true? So on to the update. 2 days later, I called Mark and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be around for the talk as well, but I was cool with it if he didn't want her there. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon today. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I started the conversation. I apologized for not warning him I would be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for hitting him. He said it was whatever, but he appreciated the apology. I told him what Jen had said about the relationship and breakup when I asked her about it, and I asked him to confirm if it was true. I pretty much said that his reaction throughout the whole thing has been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship, downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks, and he broke up with her because he lost interest. Ugh, and yet he still did all this. Jen asked if he was acting like this because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. Well, he said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her. There weren't any feelings or regrets. And to further cement the idea that this is a grown man-child, just upset that someone else is playing with their toy that they don't like anymore, he said he just didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short-term, with his older brother, and as a man, I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. So you admit it, brother. You feel violated by another man. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated, so it wasn't like I consciously did this knowing their history together, and not at all like a baby who doesn't get their way. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter. I should still have broken it off, adamant that if the roles were reversed, he would have done the same thing, which I doubt. So what about the stupid proposal performance? Well, I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Well, basically, to sum it up, he was talking about it to one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated, and the guy put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related and was doing this to get back at him, considering Jen had been hung up on him after they ended. He and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it and see if they were right. So he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Wow, the red pill community. For allegedly being the more intelligent gender, they really failed to deliver on that. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go, so it was a valid assumption. Then for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she'd only asked about him once following the breakup, and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating, and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a half-assed apology, but said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she didn't really know, and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we were in the same room, and we acted nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind. And he said okay. That pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could take back his invite to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our talk and I do feel better. My parents aren't too happy about him being uninvited, but they understood that it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a good reason for being an a-hole, and they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding. And as of now, I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll reach out to me anytime soon either. God, I love that.
You don't need to see it from my point of view. I dated you for a few weeks, and then I dumped you because I was bored of you. And now you're with this man. It's not fair. You're not meant to be considered valuable or desirable because I didn't think that about you.
Now look, as much as I want to say that's definitely how stupid his brain must work, do need to account for the fact we are perceiving this from the OP's point of view, who already clearly has a bias about the situation. Dip your shoes into their circumstance for a moment. Imagine someone in your life who you've dated or you are dating who is head over heels for you. Again, might not be the actual truth, but it's what you perceived. Clearly having a slight bit of narcissism, you note the times they have asked about you, and you've noticed them be in public spaces that you frequented when you were dating. Again, as if they would never go outside anymore because of
dating you? I don't... Yeah, anyway, all of a sudden, they're dating your older sibling. Doesn't help that your friend group, as this comment here, kind of endorses this conspiratorial behavior. But despite how he's perceiving things, it's hard to defend him when you look past this theory of his that she's not over him. Because despite that truth being blown open as definitely not true at all, he still thinks she's undeserving, or he, even the OP, is undeserving of being together. Because she's some sort of used goods. And in shocking news beyond water being wet, there's some people online who actually agree with the brother. How dare you, OP! Be with a woman who isn't a virgin? How dare you date a woman that actually has life experiences? Everyone knows that the prime candidate you should make when it comes to a long-term investment of life that is marriage and relationships, you don't hire someone with a degree and qualified work experience. No, you hire the 16-year-old who's never picked up a tool a day in their life to build your house, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but this rings a bit true for me as a response to these people's thoughts. Being upset that your brother is dating someone that you dated doesn't really add an opinion, it just kind of exposes your own insecurity. It's one of those comments that says a lot more about you than it does about the other person. Like men who don't like women who use toys in the bedroom, or women who go on about icks. Like just say you care more about how you look and are perceived in public than about your partner's happiness. Anyway, we come to the next update, which is basically the final one, where police get involved, and it's not just Mark who becomes the permanently banned member in OP's life. So I've been low contact with Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him, and he hasn't called me. And our only interactions have been in family settings. As it stands, my mom is now upset that Mark is still uninvited from my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie's birthday. Her boyfriend of 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night, and we sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress, and then she said something along the lines of, "Daddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right?" Well, I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list even if I wanted to. Then my mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since he's family. Oh, it's that trope. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. I then told her that this wasn't the time to talk about my wedding too, since the day was about Sophie, and if Mark or her want to talk about my wedding, they can call me another time. Even Sophie laid into my mom for a bit, trying to make her special day about Mark, and my mom then dropped the issue. And for those of you who might be wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't make it. Anyone else got Mark possibly being the golden child in their bingo sheet? I just scratched that bit off now. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming to my wedding. As she said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship, and that uninviting him was a step too far. I told her, again, that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding, and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument, and she said that if I wasn't going to re-invite Mark, then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her that if that's what she wants, then she can toss her invite in the trash because I won't beg her to be there. Oh, that did not at all go the way she wanted. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending, and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. Oh, yeah, he's definitely going to be a golden child. It's got to be it. She said I was being an a-hole for throwing her past mistakes in her face, and she stormed out. I then started getting messages and phone calls from her and a few family members about the whole situation, saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark to keep the peace. Jen's also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me and get me to change my mind, but to my knowledge, she hasn't been responding. So far, most of my mom's side of the family are standing in solidarity with her and not attending, while my dad and his side of the family, which is only my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids,
agree with me and are still coming. My sisters are also still coming to the wedding, and of course Jen's family too. Wow, Mark is a powerful kid to get the entire family like that on his side. Oh, also, I talked to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invite. He said he uninvited himself in the first place, and he doesn't get why they're making a big deal because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and he says he'd tell her the same. So as of now, I'm back to being low contact with my mom, but my dad and I are still on decent terms. I'm still deciding on whether I'll re-invite my mom and her family, should they change their mind about the boycott, but the chances are low, and I told my dad this too, which he understands. For now, Jen and I started looking into downsizing the venue since the guest list is significantly smaller. Yeah, bet you weren't expecting Mark to suddenly be considered a pretty okay guy in this situation, eh? He is literally not trying to fan any flames. He is genuinely just trying to step away from it all. Clearly, Mark has realized to some degree that he has been in the wrong in this situation, or he's just misinterpreted things a bit too far. Whether or not he's completely changed his ways, still up for debate, but it's still nice to know that he's not just running to mommy. So far, things seem okay. Losing out on a bit of a toxic family until we come to this little update. My mom is uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided to not come to the wedding, she came and stopped by, saying she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food, and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that this simple mistake was proposing to my fiance with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him, and she said, "It was just a joke." Jen asked her why she wanted to talk if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding, and she said she wanted to talk to Jen, and she was hoping Jen would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. See, Mum apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch Jen alone. Well, Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present, since this is about my brother. My mom made a comment somewhere in the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her, which started a pretty heated back and forth between the three of us before Jen told her to get out. She got up and started walking towards the door, and my mom followed her, still screaming at her. By this point, she's yelling about her tearing our family apart. Now, while Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground, still screaming. She hit her and tried to claw her face, and I dragged her off of her and threw her outside. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay before she left and called both of us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay, I texted my mom and told her not to bother reaching out again because we'll never speak to her again. I called my dad and sisters and told them what happened too. My dad was surprised and tried to make excuses, saying she'd been stressed about the whole situation for a while. My sisters say they knew she'd snap eventually since she's always been a crazy bitch, and they said they'd come make sure Jen is okay. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she only wanted to cut contact with her for good. I told her that part was obvious, but she should still talk to the police since she was physically assaulted, but she doesn't want my mom to get arrested. My sisters and Jen's mom came by to comfort her, thankfully, so she's doing okay. My mom, meanwhile, is blocked on everything until Jen says otherwise. I genuinely don't know what to do now. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she'd feel guilty having her arrested over this, but my sisters and I want to convince her to, and I'd at least want documentation in case something happens in the future. So main takeaway, we now know where Mark gets his crazy from. So this obviously leaves OP in a bit of a difficult situation because he clearly wants to make sure the mother gets repercussions for her actions, but to do so would be going behind his partner's back. And considering how she clearly is someone who would prefer to never do that to him, I think it's fair that the OP should sort of be mutual in that behavior, even if it does seem like it would be for the greater good. What do you think though? You think the OP should sort of betray Jen to a degree here? It does seem like her motives for not bringing this up any further with police is purely because of guilt or shame to some degree, but then then again, who are you to say you should make that decision over someone else? Maybe Jen's right. Maybe doing this would just kick the hornet's nest, so to speak. Maybe it is better just to move on from it and pretend it didn't happen. I think at the very least, they should do whatever they can to document what all the stuff that's occurred. Now, there's a collection of some comments and replies from the OP. Some people saying that this is all Mark's fault. He should have taken responsibility and sat down with the mum in general. To which the OP's responded that he thinks Mark just doesn't really seem to understand what accountability is. He really does believe he has nothing to do with the mum's actions and doesn't believe he needs to take any part in this beyond what he's already done. And look, I'll be honest, I kind of agree with him. I feel like by making it Mark's responsibility here, we're completely excusing the autonomy of the mother. She is an adult, far older than the both of you. She is not a 5-year-old or hell, even a 12-year-old. She's the one who escalated this situation, not Mark. Yes, I agree Mark is the catalyst of this situation, but he didn't tell his mother to go after OP. He didn't tell her to do all the things she did. Now, there is technically a final update, which is more just a little bit of lore, if you're interested at all. Something to skim through as we wrap everything up. For those of us who thought it, yes, Mark was the golden child. Ding, ding, ding! Hardly spent time with all the other kids, but they'd spend time with Mark as often as possible. And note, he wasn't the first child, he was the second child. So strange that usually it's like the youngest child that usually gets most of the attention, but no, they had 4 kids, because he has 2 sisters, and therefore, yeah. And yet Mark still got all the favoritism, making it clear that whenever Mark got stuff, it was purely for him, but whenever they get toys for the sisters or even OP, they had to share them. Oh, here's one for all the older siblings out there. When Mark would screw up, OP would get punished for not being a good role model. Oh my god, when he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push a kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother right. When OP was 13, he pushed to get an allowance, doing chores to actually earn some money. He got $25 a week to start saving. But then Mark found out and was like, I want that too! And instead of just equally giving him the same sort of situation, they just gave him $10 allowance for free all the time. So that OP ended up only getting $15 a week instead. Note again, the OP was doing all the work. The brother was just enjoying some free allowance. So it's completely understandable that they grew extremely distant as they got older. Oh, and to clarify, no, I was wrong. OP wasn't the first child. He was the second, I guess. Because Maggie, he would be the first, OP would be the second, then Mark, and then sister Sophie. Which I feel like is even worse. Oh, and to summarize all this nightmare, OP saved up for their own car at 18 with all their own hard work. Mark then gets his license and is pushed by parents to let Mark use OP's car whenever he wants. Then when Mark's suddenly wanting to have a car of his own, their parents, well, mom, threatens to kick OP out if they don't give him the car that he personally worked to save up for. Of which he did because he literally had nowhere else to go. I mean, wow, great job, mummy. Oh, geez, if I want to get even more depressing. When I graduated high school, parents skipped graduation because Mark didn't want to go because it was going to take too long and be boring. Instead, OP's sisters and aunt and uncle attended who also wanted to take him out to celebration. But instead, OP had to go home because the parents wanted him home because they made dinner for him to make it up for him. And the dinner was something OP couldn't eat because he's allergic to shellfish, and the mum served chicken and shrimp on the same serving plates. So he couldn't even eat the dinner. Oh, and to bring in, there's another sister too, actually. So many siblings. This is 5 siblings we've got so far. So as OP got into college, he basically cut contact with the mum, and the mum was always trying to reach out to him, but he was threatening to cut contact with any family members who would try and get him to reach out to mum. When Sophie was being threatened to be cut off if she kept trying, mum then tried going through their other older sister, Charlotte, causing him, OP, to file a restraining order for harassment, or threaten to do so. Then finally, after moving back, Charlotte apparently had managed to get mum into seeing a family therapist, with part of their reconciliation process starting when OP moved back home. Which then brings us to some further understanding as to why Jen never really met OP's family. As they say in this post, they weren't really even sure what their relationship with their parents was going to be like at the time, let alone their relationship with Jen and how that was going to go. So understandably, he didn't really want to mention the family at all because he was kind of ready to pretty much cut contact from them if needed to. Like, why advertise the family to Jen if it's possible she's never ever going to have to deal with them anyway? We're going to end this with an anecdotal conspiracy because this is just too spicy not to read. There's a few reasons why Mark could be the favorite. I hate to say this, but keep this in mind. Mark is the favorite because he is your your half-brother. I have heard of this and know it happened to someone. My friend could never understand why until a 23andMe showed they were half-brothers. My friend's mom had an affair and really wanted to be with the other man. She spoiled his child to show the love she had for the bio dad. Don't want to say that is a reason, but you did say there is not much of a resemblance.